I want you to think about the worst Christmas gift you've ever received. Get it in your mind. For some of you, it automatically happened. You're like, oh, I know. I dread get your worst Christmas gift you've ever received. Get it in your mind, okay? Everybody got it? I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 more seconds. Everybody got it? Worst Christmas gift ever. Now I want you to think about the person that gave it to you, right? What went wrong? What happened? What happened? Gift giving, right? Gift giving can create stress. In fact, when you look at stressors in the United States around the season of Christmas, gift giving is one of the highest, most stress-causing incidents. Not incidents, that's a bad word. It depends on how bad the gift is, you know what I'm saying? Right? Gift giving is one of the greatest stressors in the United States around the season of Christmas. Would you believe that? That's wild. Gift giving. And there's all kind of reasons for it. Sometimes it's financial. It's like, man, we didn't prepare, and now we got what we normally have each month, and we got like 11 people we got to buy for, you know what I'm saying? So how are we going to make that happen? Sometimes it's like, hey, finding the right gift, and it's like, golly, they're so hard to buy for. How do you buy something for someone who has everything? At least that's the phrase I hear a lot of times, right? There's time constraints. Like, I just don't have enough time. Like, if I had more time, I could give better gifts. Like maybe sometimes we fall into those kind of things. Or maybe it's just a fear, like they're not going to like it, If you suffer from a condition that is associated to gift-giving stress, I want to give you a short little test, and then it's just a pass or fail, right? That's all it is. And this is going to let you know if you are currently suffering from gift-giving stress. Okay, it's one question, and that's it. And how you answer the question, immediately you know if you have the condition or not. Here it comes. Ready for this? Here we go. You know you have gift-giving stress if you have, what is a good word? Allowed yourself or the people associated with you in your life to only give gift cards. If you're the gift card giver, you have succumbed to gift-giving stress. Because you said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to let them find something they like. I ain't going to do it, right? So I'm just going to give them a gift card, and that's going to be it. And then you even stress about the store you're going to get it for them, too. You know what I'm saying? You're like, well, when you get them this one? You're like, oh, just get them American Express or Visa. And then you have the conversation, well, there's a fee. Isn't one of these got a fee on it, like $3.95? And you're going back and forth, and that's what you've done. Like, that's it. We're just, we ain't going to do that. We're just going to give them cash. We're just giving them cash. But then you stress out all Christmas Day when you hand the kid the cash, and you're like, hold on. Did they wrap that all up in the box when we were passing the trash bag around? Did it get back in there? Or go give that to your parents real quick? Because now you're stressing over that. Not only are you stressed about, I couldn't get you the gift I wanted to because I don't know what a gift I want to get you. I'm going to give you cash. Now I want to make sure that your cash goes to the right person so later you can get the thing you actually want. And I'm stressed about the whole thing, Gift giving. We've attempted to make our Christmas series really practical. First week, Jason walked us through the first Christmas without someone and the reality that grief is a part of the season of Christmas. And you just can't avoid it. You live long enough, and eventually you come to that first Christmas. And so we walk through that. We walk through a promise of the faithfulness of God that says, blessed are those who mourn, they will be comforted. That's a promise that's built not only into the presence and purpose and person of God, but it's also built into the community of God-like people, community of Christians, where we actually have a responsibility to stand with people as they mourn, even in the Christmas season. Week 2, Jason then walked us through the first Christmas following Jesus. What is the difference between someone who follows Jesus in the Christmas season and someone who simply follows Christmas? And ultimately, we landed on a really simple phrase. The difference is who and how you worship. There's so much common ground in the Christmas season, gifts and food and parties and trees and lights. And that's universal in the United States. Like that's everywhere, right? But what's the difference in a Jesus following Christmas and a just following Christmas? And it's who and how you worship. Week 3, Christmas gifts. The first Christmas gifts. I believe that we will land in one place. 3 words. Give good gifts. Now, you might be wondering, why in the world are we talking about the gifts we are giving my family and friends on Sunday morning? Well, it's part of the mystery. We're going to get to it. Let's go to where maybe we find our reason for why we give gifts. Let's take a journey to a book called Matthew. If you're new to Bible study, the Bible's got 2 very distinct parts, an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament chronicles the people of God, the starting of the people of God, and it really establishes the need for Jesus. And the second piece of the Bible is the New Testament, which begins with the birth of Jesus, the result of Jesus' life and teachings, which is the church. And this particular book we're going to look at today is the very start of that second part of the Bible, the New Testament. It's written by a guy named Matthew, a guy that at first wasn't a fan or a follower of Jesus, but later, after being introduced to Jesus, changed his life completely, and he begins to write from his own perspective. He writes this in what we, at first glance, would consider a birth narrative, though I think when we look a little further, we realize that the birth was actually pretty distant from this moment. But let's take a look. Matthew 2, 1 through 3. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw a star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Now, I'm going to read that to you again because we're going to kind of break it down piece by piece because there's a lot in what I just read that we've got to kind of unpack and make sure we understand why we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. So I'll read it to you again. Focus in because we're not going to be able to leave the whole thing on the screen the entire time. Actually, I'm going to drink some water first because I'm about to die. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So our setting, it says after Jesus was born. Now, when we look into the specifics behind that phrase, after Jesus was born, only thing it tells us is that he had come out of the womb. That's it. It doesn't give us any more information. It just says he was born and it was after that took place. So it could be 5 minutes, it could be 5 years. We don't know up until this point other than it's after Jesus was born. Second thing it tells us is that they came and they were searching out where Jesus was born, which was Bethlehem. Now, this is important because the city of Bethlehem is connected to the most famous king in the history of the people of God, the Jewish people. His name was David. And this is a big deal. That was David's hometown. And so all of a sudden, Jesus and the story of the birth of Jesus is getting connected to the most famous king in Jewish history, David. The third thing it tells us is it was in Judea. Now, this is enormous. Judea is huge for the Jewish people for 2 reasons. It is both the land and the people from which kings come from. Kings are going to come from the land of Judah or Judea. They're going to come from the tribe of Judah. That's where kings come from if you're a Jewish person. Now, this is important. It's important because people are going to start thinking that Jesus might be king of the Jews. And so it makes sense that he would come from the land and the people of Judah. It also tells us that King Herod was a part of this little narrative. Now, King Herod was a fake king. And when I say fake king, this is what I mean. He was not Davidic at all. When we said, hey, Jesus was Bethlehem, the birthplace of King David, the greatest king, Herod was not connected to David at all in any sense of the imagination. And not only that, he also wasn't from the place or the people of Jewish kings. So he wasn't from Judea, and he wasn't from the tribe of Judah. Now, if you're new with Bible study, you're like, hold on, what is this tribes of which you speak? We just did a series on a little collection of talks on a guy named Joseph. Joseph had a father, his name was Jacob, which I know I might be losing you, but we got Joseph's daddy was Jacob. Jacob had another name. Anybody remember? Israel. Yeah, y'all got it. And now Jacob, also known as Israel, had a twin brother. Anybody know his name? Say it louder with confidence. Esau, that's what I'm talking about. Now, here's the thing. Jacob has a bunch of boys. Eventually, we get what we know today as the 12 tribes of Israel, right? Judah is one of those tribes of Israel. Esau, he has kids. King Herod is not from Jacob's lineage at all. He's not in any of the 12 tribes of Israel. He comes from the lineage of Esau. And so when the Jewish people look at King Herod, they not only see someone who is not associated with any of their land or their people that kings that are supposed to be for Jewish people come from. He's not even from the same family tree in terms of the family tree that God said, this is where my promise is going to come from. He's from the twin that messed the whole thing up, right? And so look, here's the deal. When they look at King Herod, they're like, you're a fraud. You're a fraud. The only reason he is king of the Jews is because Rome, who occupied Jerusalem at the time, placed him as king. He had no right to the throne. He had no birthright. Nobody voted on him. None of those things. Rome said, hey, who can we get to do our bidding in an occupied territory? And Herod was like, take me. And that's what they did. And so Rome, with all of their kings in occupied territory, takes their hand, sticks it up the puppet's rear end, and does the talking. That's what Rome does. And so every time he would say anything out, like the Jewish people were just like, you're not our king, kid. You know, like you got power, but you don't belong. You're not from our people. You're not from our places. In fact, you're from the wrong brother, you know. Needless to say, the Jews despised him, which then produced, when you have a king who's not officially put in power, like the way you're supposed to be done, and everybody hates you, that naturally produces some paranoia and some crazy acts for you to overcome all of the things, because it really wasn't paranoid. They were all out to get him. They would love to see him gone, which is why we get the slaughtering of the firstborn under 2 years old, and that Jason walked through in week 1. That's where it came from, is he was just paranoid. And the way he dealt with his problems was he just killed a lot of people. So that's King Herod. We then have another set of people that are introduced called Magi. And it says they are from the east. So we know that they are Gentiles. In other words, they're not Jews. We see that they study stars in some fashion. That they had seen some star that they have identified with some type of royal birth. And not only that, they saw the star and they were drawn to it. They're one of the first people that we see, not angelic in any sense of the imagination, people like you and I that were drawn to Christmas. People that were not Jesus followers or God-fearers that thought Christmas was a good idea. And so they traveled. And they traveled and they traveled and they traveled, and eventually they get to the place where they could find Jesus. We are also introduced to a phrase in those verses I just read, a phrase, King of the Jews. Now, this is a really important phrase. It's really important because it's only used in 2 different sections of Jesus' life. The first one is here, around the birth timing with the Magi. It doesn't show up again by anyone until we get to the death narrative of Jesus. And there, it's a Roman governor named Pilate that asked Jesus in the middle of one of his trials, are you the king of the Jews? And then a second time, the soldiers, as they are mocking Jesus just before they put him on the cross, they kneel down in front of him and say, hail the King of the Jews. And then finally, there is a sign placed at the top of the cross of Jesus that says, this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. The other thing we learn in those first 3 verses we read was that King Herod was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him, when they heard that a king of the Jews had been born. In other words, he didn't know. He didn't know. When the Magi come rolling into town on their camels, and they're just cameling on in, and they hop off. I don't know how you ride a camel. Anybody ever ridden a camel? Is this how you ride a camel? Or do you sit sideways on it? And so like, okay. Right? So you're riding a camel into town. It's good to know, Courtney. This is good. Yeah. He comes riding into town, gets off the camel, and like, hey, we're here to see a king of the Jews because he's got a star. And he's like, what? Now, let's pause here and let's think about this. Let's just pause for a second. Think about this. If we go back to last week where Jason walked us through the shepherds, that was at the time of the birth of Jesus, right? Like, Jesus is born, they're still in the stable, he's still in the manger, shepherds are there. At the end of that narrative, it says that the shepherds went and told everybody, and everyone was amazed at what they had heard, right? Now, evidently, from that time to this time, whatever the shepherds told people had died down and had not made it the 5.2 miles from Bethlehem back to Jerusalem. Like, word had not gotten that there was a choir of angels. They came to some shepherds, or maybe word got there and they were like, yeah, okay. The shepherds said some angels appeared to them. The people that God least is like ceremonially unclean. God went to them first in the field and told them about a king born in a feed trough. He has zero chance. Well, that didn't happen, right? That's the only explanation. Because everybody was amazed at what they had said. But eventually, it doesn't get back to Jerusalem. So much so that Herod doesn't know. Nobody knows Jesus has been born. The Magi are the first people to tell him. And their response is they're disturbed. Now, this tracks, though. It tracks. Because if we fast forward 19 chapters in the book of Matthew, or we're in chapter 2. We fast forward 19 chapters in the book of Matthew. Jesus is entering Jerusalem, the very same city the Magi showed up to 19 chapters earlier. Matthew 21:10 says this. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, who is this? It's such a strange response. We go, fast forward just a little bit, we're going to go to verse 11. Now we're skipping over a piece of the narrative. It's a piece of the narrative that Jason touched on week 1, which is the scheme that Herod comes up with to find out the date of the birth of Jesus, which then sets the ceiling of who he's going to allow to survive that are boys that are in the city of Bethlehem. So he asks them, he's like, hey, when did this star appear? They're like, it gives him a timetable. He then sets his timetable for his soldiers to say, from this time down, all the boys are dead, right? So that's what takes place. We get past that. We get to verse 11. They have left King Herod. They have found the house where Jesus is. This is what it says in verse 11. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, it clearly says they came to the house. So it doesn't say they came to the manger. It doesn't say they came to the stable. It says they came to the house. H-O-U-S-E. It's not English. It's in Greek, which is not H-O-U-S-E. But you get what I'm saying. They came to the house. It also says that they saw the child. Now, the Greek word for child is very different from the Greek word for baby. When we look at Luke 2's narrative and the manger scene, he uses that Greek word for baby. It's a different word that Matthew's using here. It's like a toddler. So time has passed. And so I would like to just pause our regularly scheduled programming and do my yearly announcement. That was good. Do my yearly announcement, which is this is for your own spiritual growth and development. And just to remind you that your magi, your wise men, do not belong in your manger scene. And if you want to continue to be unbiblical, then keep them there. That's fine. But just know, every single person who's in your family that walks in your house, they're going to look at it and they're going to know you're a fraud. that you prefer aesthetics over biblical accuracy, okay? Let me tell you how this works. You get your manger scene set up and you take the wise men. They're typically the ones that are like, they look wise. And you take them. A lot of times there's 3 of them. And they're camels. The camels don't belong in the manger either. You take the camels, you take the wise men, you figure out which side of the house does the sun come up on. That's the east, because they came from the east. And those suckers go on that side of the house. If you come to my house, you're welcome to come and fact check me. You will see our manger scene on one side, and you will have to migrate yourself to the eastern part of the house where you will find the wise men. And that's where every single one of your wise men will be. If you want to be unbiblical, there's 110 other churches in Coweta County. You can go and spread your unbiblical selves there. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to see any of y'all's pictures on Christmas morning and find some wise men in a manger. I will comment immediately. Heretics. All right, time back in. It says that they worshiped him. Now, I got a newborn at the house. He's two and a little bit weeks old, right? Actually, he's right back there. He's a little more than 2 weeks old, isn't he? He's 3 weeks old. 3 weeks old? 2? 3. 3 weeks old, yeah. Time flies, okay? He's 3 weeks old. I think he's adorable, right? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think he's the cutest thing. It has never, not one single solitary time, came into my imagination or my mind to bow down and worship him. Never. Like not one. Like even when he does the cute things, even when newborns can't still see. Even when I think he can see me, even though he can't, and he smiles a little bit, even though he's just like passing gas or something like that. He's like, even in those moments, like, man, you are the cutest thing on the planet. It never has occurred to me to get on my face and worship him. Yet for some reason, both with the shepherds, who are as poor gets, and the magi, who are as rich gets, the very moment they see the baby Jesus or the toddler Jesus, their response is, on our face. On our face. Now, Mary didn't have a farmhouse sign printed that says, remove your shoes, worship my baby when they came in. You know what I'm saying? Like, she got one of those printed at Hobby Lobby. That's not what happened. There was none of that. That was their natural, and they walked into his presence, and they fell to their face. Again, this is why last week was so important. What is the difference between Christmas for a follower of Jesus and just Christmas for a follower of Christmas? The difference is who and how you worship. So if you've made all of your Christmas plans and you've got all the food figured out and all the gift cards figured out, boo. And you got all the details and the parties and the outfits and all the things, but you have not thought at all about what is our worship. Who and how will we be worshiping in this season? Man, that should cause us to pause just maybe for a moment, maybe for a morning, and say, let me reintroduce my brain to the reality of the season I'm about to walk into. Because if we walk into the house of Jesus, and I'm not talking about this church, it's not the house of God, right? This is just a brick building, used to be a bank where the church gathers, right? But if you walk into the season of Jesus and there is no reaction for worship, then you probably don't actually know what season you've just walked into. It says they presented him with gifts. Told you we'd get to the gifts. Gold, a gift worthy of a king, a symbol of kingship. Frankincense, the resin of a tree that grows in Southeast Arabia, India, and Somalia. Incredibly expensive. It was a luxury item. Often it would be used in high worship. And myrrh, from the resin of trees grown in Arabia and Ethiopia, often used for preparing bodies for burial, anointing, and embalming. 3 incredibly thoughtful gifts. Is this the reason we give gifts on Christmas? It's a good question. I mean, let's take it a bit further. Let's do a little history together. Think about it. What did Jesus give for Christmas gifts? Like, rack your brain real quick. I mean, Jesus is born, right? That's what Christmas is. And then when he's like, I don't know, let's just say 30. It's his birthday, right? It's dirty 30 for Jesus. What kind of gifts are being given? None. There's no accounts of Jesus' birthday. That's it. Like we get the birth account, and then there's no more birthday celebrations. None. So Jesus dies. Well, then, what about Paul and his writings? And James, his little brother? Maybe Jude. Maybe John and some of his later writings. Maybe Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd of Peter. Surely, after Jesus is gone, what are the Christmas traditions? What's happening there? There's none. None. In fact, they don't even remember Jesus' birthday. It's not something they celebrated. You know what they celebrated? His death and resurrection. That's what they celebrated. That's what they remembered. Why is it that we guess that December 25th is Jesus' birthday? Because they didn't celebrate it. In Jewish culture, that wasn't a big deal. Birthdays weren't the thing. Martyrdom was a huge deal. Death Day, Resurrection Day, those were days to remember. But in the first century, there's no Christmas. Are we kidding? Have we ever thought about it? Like there's none. There's no biblical answer to it at all. If they celebrated the birth of Jesus, it was never important enough to write about it or talk about it to anybody else. Not in the Bible or outside of the Bible, any extra biblical references. None. In fact, it isn't until we get to like the 300s, like the 4th century, that officially Emperor Constantine of Rome institutes it as a holiday, 336 AD. Now, when that happens, because it became official in 336, doesn't mean it wasn't celebrated before then. In order for it to become official, there had to have been some movement that had already taken place. But there's not a lot written about it. In fact, it's scant. It's teeny tiny. But it becomes this official holiday, right? Christianity has made something special under Constantine. And so it becomes a big deal. But it's not the Christmas we're thinking of. It's a religious type deal. It's a religious focus, a religious celebration. It marks the birth of Jesus. If any gifts were given at all, it was gifts to the poor. Now, also, 4th century, this might be someone that maybe gives us a little bit of inspiration. There was a bishop named Nicholas of Myra. 4th century Christian bishop. He was known for his generosity, especially towards children and the poor. And there were stories of him paying dowries for poor women or daughters of poor families. There were stories of him leaving coins in poor children's shoes. And on December 6th, 343 AD, he passed away. Now, eventually, a number of hundred years later, like 400 or 500 years later, the Catholic Church made him a saint. When that took place, they began to celebrate the day that he died, which was December 6th. And so there were some celebrations that started to take place in his honor of now Saint Nicholas. And so people would have feasts and they would have gifts, and the church rallied around this individual that had a lot of really good and well-meaning behind his life. It was admirable. If we look through the medieval era at Christmas, the 5th through the 15th century, it's still not really a gift-giving moment. There's really big celebrations. In fact, it's not really one day of Christmas. The 12 days of Christmas are a much bigger deal. December 25th to January 5th. And then on the 13th day, there was a big religious celebration called the Day of the Epiphany, which is traditionally for the Catholic Church when they celebrated the Magi, which we're talking about in the story today, showing up to see Jesus. But again, it was religious. It wasn't family-centered. It wasn't gather by a fire and exchange gifts. It was none of those things. It was, and if anything, it was more communal. And in fact, if you were to go back in that medieval era, you would see Christmas in those 12 days as more of a fun, and the encyclopedias and the historians would even use the word mischief to describe the celebrations of Christmas. It was partying, playful chaos, one scholar writes. In England, there was what they would call a Lord of Misrule, Misrule, like a party leader. And they would organize these noisy, big feasts and games in the middle of town squares. One of their favorite games to play, let me make sure I get this right, was called Hoodman Blind. Hoodman. Now, when I say things that's from England, immediately I want to use an accent. Hoodman blind. I don't know if I'm very good at. I'm not. Stab tells me all the time I'm terrible at accents. So this is the way it works. The person that's in the middle of the circle is a bunch of people in a round circle. The person in the middle of the circle puts a hood on, which doesn't translate that well here. We're not for hood games. That's not a thing. If you're a closet hood guy, you belong here, but you do need Jesus desperately. And we can have a conversation about that because we're going to fix that quick, okay? But for this, Hoodman puts a thing on because evidently they didn't trust your blindfolds. So they put a hood on you, and then people would come up and like hit you and pull at your clothes and shout at you, and you had to grab someone, and you had to then guess who it was that you grabbed, right? That was the game. And if you could grab somebody while they were getting close to you and guess who it was, I don't know if you're feeling their face, I don't know what you're doing, but you're grabbing them, and if you could guess who it was, then they had to put the hood on, and they became the person in the middle. That's the kind of Christmas revelry that was taking place in the medieval times. Imagine being called medieval. They got it. There was also religious pieces to this. There were still church services. There were nativity plays. But again, there still wasn't this family get-together, exchange Christmas gifts on the regular. At best, you saw it in the wealthiest families. But the common families, 99% of the world, that's not what you found. You get to the 16th and 17th century, the Protestant Reformation. A guy named Martin Luther and other reformers. They saw the Catholic Church and said, hey, we don't want to do what the Catholic Church is doing. And they honor and revere saints. And so a day like the Feast of St. Nicholas on December 6th, which was still celebrated all throughout Europe, they said, we don't want to do that. And so they would push back on it. Instead, they pointed the direction of the Christmas season to December 25th, which had long standing since Constantine back in the 300s. They pointed it to there, and they then created this new narrative. And they revolved around Jesus, and the translation for us is the Christ child, was the way Martin Luther said it. And it made the Christ child the central figure of Christmas, as opposed to these parties and games and St. Nicholas and all these things. But even still, it wasn't the focus that we find it is today. Now, some Protestants, like the Puritans in England and in the United States, who at the time was just called America, they viewed the revelry of Christmas as excessive and unchristian. In fact, in 1647, the English Puritans banned Christmas, which resulted in people having secret Christmas parties. That sounds fun. And then you get to the 19th century, or in history, it's known as the Victorian era. And this transformed Christmas gift giving into a family-centered tradition. Yes, the 19th century. It was shaped by literary works like Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, 1843. Romanticized Christmas as a time of family, generosity, and goodwill. It was during this time that we found the rise of Christmas markets in Europe. They became popular, and they offered handmade goods that were easily affordable to the common people. It was during this time that we find ourselves in the Industrial Revolution. The production of affordable goods, it made it easier for people to purchase and exchange gifts. This is also the era where we saw the rise of department stores and Christmas shopping. And then we get to gift wrapping. The idea of suspense. The wrapping paper industry was created by accident in 1917. Two brothers from Kansas City, Missouri ran out of tissue paper. And so they had some leftover, the way they call it, quote, fancy French paper that was intended to line envelopes. But instead they used it to wrap some gifts. They sold their excess and they sold out quickly. The next year they repeated it. And then in 1919, it was so popular, they began to print their own paper. And they established the company we all know today as Hallmark. And there you have it. One of the most stressful social expectations in Christmas was created. So I'm asking you a question. Why do you give gifts? Why do you give gifts? Is it because the wise men did? Is that our motivation? They're like, okay, if we're going to do Christmas as a follower of Jesus, and I'm going to give gifts, why? Oh, well, the wise men, right? That's the tradition. Isn't that what they've always taught us? The wise men brings gifts to Jesus, and the way we're going to celebrate that is I'm going to give gifts not to Jesus, but to other people. And then maybe a couple for myself. Thank you, Jesus. You know? You might be wondering, why in the world are we talking about gift giving in church? I want you to hear this. Because the why behind you doing anything matters. And I know as a father and a husband that works, and have a wife that works, that what you spend your money on matters. And why you spend your money should matter. And when I look at studies that show that gift giving is one of the greatest causes of stress in the United States for Christmas, it makes me ask the question, hold on, why is stress associated with the most incredible moment in the lives of Jesus followers, the day that God showed, I'm keeping my promise, I'm sending my son? Why would we want stress associated with that? And if we want to be people of peace, if we want to be people that change the behavior and the thoughts of the people in our communities, then it's got to start with an honest conversation here inside of a facility that's filled by you, the church. So I asked you the question, why do you give gifts? Because your why matters. Now, if you think I'm about to tell you don't give gifts, you are wrong. I am a huge advocate of gift giving. So that's not the church you sign up to be a part of today. But the why, it matters. So let's ask the question, why do we give gifts? Why do the wise men give gifts? Easy. They gave gifts to Jesus to honor him, to respect him as part of their worship for him. So if we're going to give gifts because the wise men gave gifts, we should probably give for the same reason, if that's your why. So when you think through gift giving and you taking some finances that God has given you, and you're going to take that and use it for something, are you thinking through any of those words? Like when you think through spending some of your money, adding to some of your stress, are you thinking, I'm doing this to honor, to respect, to show admiration? Maybe you're giving because of a 4th century bishop named Nicholas. Well, why did he give? Generosity, charity, to do good in his community? Is that why you're giving gifts? When you're looking down the halls or swiping through Amazon, is that what's on your mind? Generosity, charity, to do good? Or are you giving gifts because that's just what we do? Why do we give? Let me tell you the 4 most common reasons given for why people give gifts. Number 1, obligation. They have to. Number 2, to be loved. Now, you really want to know why we're talking about this? Friends, if any of you are giving a Christmas gift this year because you feel unloved and you think that's going to solve your problem, these are real people's responses. Let me just first tell you, you can't buy people's love. They'll pretend, but you can't buy it. And the truth is you're loved. You may just not have met the one that loves you most. The 3rd reason people give, to say I'm sorry. If you think that you're going to solve your family drama with a good Christmas gift, if you're going to solve I hadn't spoke to them in 6 months because of what they said about so-and-so at the July 4th thing. And you think a Christmas gift is going to solve that? No, it's not. It's not. You can't buy your way to healthy relationships. We've got to do the hard work. Fourth reason people give. Because they're getting me something. It's a terrible reason. I feel it. I feel that pressure. It's a bad reason. Your why matters. If this is creating a lot of stress in your life, it matters. And maybe you would feel less stress if you figured out your why. If you clarified the why behind, why would you sink the financial resources you're about to in these Christmas gifts? The why matters. I would say this. You should give because of who you want to be and how you want the world to be. Give for that reason. Do not give and create financial stress for yourself. Do not give out of obligation with no purpose. That's a waste. I'll tell you this. Do not be afraid to take a risk in giving. I don't mean a financial risk. I mean the risk that has taught us all just to give gift cards and money. Like, don't be afraid to get it wrong. Don't be scared that they're going to open up that gift and be underwhelmed, you know? Like, that's what we think. Because we kind of romanticize, like we pick out a gift. We've all had that moment. We're like, man, they're going to love this. And we've played it out in our head, what it's going to look like when they open that gift. We played it out, and we're like, man, they're going to be so stoked. And all of a sudden, like, and you're filming, right? You're filming, like, I'm about to film this bad boy. You ask somebody else, like, hey, film from that angle because I'm going to put two together. The whole thing. Or maybe you've called the whole family, hey, so-and-so's opening their gift. I want everybody to come see because you're just like, man, I've thought this through. This is about to be a home run. Cool, let's go. You know, Yahtzee. Not Yahtzee the game, that's lame. But you know what I'm saying? Like, a good gift. A good gift. I'm sorry if y'all bought somebody Yahtzee. It's fine. I'm sure they'll love it. Right? And all of a sudden, they start opening the gift. And instead of like it playing out how you saw it, and instead of like, whoa, oh, I can't believe, like instead of that happening, it's like, oh, wow, you know? And you're like, oh, this is embarrassing. Good gift givers, you got to take a risk. I'm serious about this. And you might have said, teenagers are so hard to buy for, right? Right? So hard to buy for. Let me tell you, they're not hard to buy for. They're not. They're not hard to buy for. Let me just tell you how this works. Take a picture of them next time they're in some drippy outfit. You know what I'm saying? And a fit. When they got a good fit. You know what I'm saying? Hadley, you know what I'm talking about? Next time they got one of them good fits on. Take a picture of them, right? Just take a picture of them. That's normal. They probably won't be smiling at it because they're teenagers. That's their problem. But it's the fit that matters, right? When they're feeling good about themselves, take a picture. Take that picture and just Google ChatGPT. Upload that picture into ChatGPT and say, hey, this is my 13-year-old. Someone who dresses like this, give me 10 ideas for Christmas gifts. ChatGPT will analyze the picture and boom, there it is, right? Here's 10 gifts. Figure out where those 10 gifts are sold. Walk into the store and say, look, I'm looking for this, but I want your advice. Find somebody who you think looks cool in the store. Walk over to him and say, look, I'm looking, this is where he dresses. I'm looking for something they're going to love, right? I'm willing to take a risk. Help me out. ChatGPT's helped me out. I need a little human experience. Have a conversation with someone. And they're going to walk you over to it. You might say, I'll get the wrong size. Kids do not mind returning things. It's not a big deal. They'll just go, because they want to go to the store anyway and spend their other gift cards to the people who didn't think anything about them. Got it. So it's fine. So, and then did you take a risk? You get it to them, and then they're going to open it. And then if ChatGPT and the person at the store says I'm telling you, you'll be right more times than you're wrong. You'll still fail. I take the time. But now when I'm hearing myself say this, I realize I've just created a lot of work. Number one, I got to wait till they put on an outfit they like. Then I got to take a picture. Then I got to download ChatGPT. Then I got to upload it. I got to read. Then I got to find the stores and go talk to somebody. I tell you, honestly, it's worth it for them to just to get it right, even if it's every other year. For them to know, listen to this, listen. I know we might think this is so trivial, gift giving. For a 13-year-old to look at someone who's 65 years old and say, hold on, how did you know? And for them to say, well, I had a lot of help. Let me walk you through what I did. I got your mom to take a picture. She uploaded it. I downloaded ChatGPT. And then I read through 10 things. I scoured the stores and I went and talked to the coolest person at that store. And she walked me through 10 ideas and I narrowed it down to this. And honestly, if you don't like it, I got a receipt for you because I just want you to be happy. But I want you to know, I was thinking about nothing but you on Saturday afternoon. That's a great place to be. That's a great reason to give a gift. Here's the thing. As followers of Jesus, in all things Christmas, we should be leading. Our whys should be secure. Our finances should be responsible. Our generosity should be at its peak. And our peace should be something that we give out freely to people in an incredibly stressful season. Church, give good gifts.